5 knots, 7 knots under steam.
He puts a lot of effort into this ship, but he sadly catches a cold and dies during the construction program. And by the time she's finished, Fulton is actually dead.
Fulton's premature death was tragic irony. He had finally made it in his own country, with a steam-powered warship 30 years ahead of its time. Today, the United States Navy has grown to be the most powerful Navy in the world. This power effectively gives the United States command of the seas. Things were very different after Trafalgar. The U.S. Navy was tiny. What's more, her coastal waters were constantly patrolled, her merchant ships molested, and her ports blockaded by the powerful British. In 1812, it led to war. But defending America's shores were her frigates, fast, single-deck cruisers. The young nation had built 6. In engagement after engagement, they proved they could win a fight, a reputation that led to one of the most famous actions of the War of 1812, and became a turning point in naval history. On the 1st of June, 1813, a frigate of the British Navy was prowling in American waters. Her gun crew was hand-picked, and she was looking for a showdown. The frigate was the HMS Shannon.
The captain of HMS Shannon, Philip Vere Broke, was a man who dedicated his entire career to the development of modern scientific gunnery. He trained his men to fire at the target and to hit the target.
Off Boston Harbor, Brooke issued a challenge to the commander of the USS Chesapeake, a frigate he considered equal to his own.
The Shannon wanted the Chesapeake to come out to basically relieve the Shannon of its blockading duties, and taunted the commanding officer, James Lawrence, and the crew of the Chesapeake to come out, let's have a one-on-one fight, let's do it in a gentlemanly way, and decide the issue. And unfortunately, Lawrence accepted that challenge.
Broke had been in command of the Shannon for 5 years, and he'd spent those 5 years preparing for this one culminating moment of his naval career, a single-ship engagement with a ship of equal force that was willing to fight. And on that morning, he found he had a willing enemy. Through superior ship handling and vastly superior gunnery, Broke quite literally destroyed the upper deck party of the American ship, knocked her wheel overboard, killed all of her officers or badly wounded them, knocked over 100 of her crew, killed and fatally wounded, and within 11 minutes the ship was unmanageable, had been boarded and captured.
Brooke's achievement was spectacular. Well-placed guns in the hands of a specialized crew had secured an impressive victory. It was training and technology, the basis of all modern weapon systems, and it would lead to the establishment of the first fully professional Navy. For the Chesapeake, the war was over. Captured and sailed back to England as a British ship, she was soon broken up and her timbers offered for sale to the highest bidder. Bought by an English miller, the only surviving trace of what was once a pride of the American Navy lies unnoticed in a quiet English village. The decks of the USS Chesapeake are now the floors of a flour mill. England's command of the seas was an irritant to other countries besides the United States. France was also desperate to find an answer to the British Navy's overwhelming presence.
The British had more ships, they had better trained crews, and they also had this new tactic of breaking the line.
The French are looking for a leveler. How do we deal with the fact that the British are actually better sailors than us and more numerous and probably going to win most of the battles?
It was a soldier who came up with a possible answer. General Henri Paxence was familiar with field howitzers and the damage they could do. He saw a way to increase the firepower of the naval guns by replacing solid cannonballs with something infinitely more destructive.
Okay, here is Paxence's secret. This is a round shell. It is hollow. It has an 8-inch diameter. And this is what allowed the cannon of Bouzier to have its destructive force, because Paxence created a cannon that could shoot horizontally against a wooden warship and explode on board the ship.
To fire the shell horizontally, Paxence needed to redesign the cannon without increasing either its weight or its length. A wider bore would mean a thinner barrel, but allow for a much heavier breech to take the force of the explosion.
Paxence, as others, believe that most of the explosive energy occurred around the charge itself, and that you could reduce the amount of metal in the tube once from the charge on. This thinner tube would allow you to have a gun that weighed the same as the heaviest guns aboard French ships, but with a much larger diameter of the bore.
Probably the single greatest transformation between Trafalgar and the 1850s is the fact that ships can now fire exploding weapons at each other and can do enormously increased amounts of damage in very short spaces of time. It takes hours at Trafalgar to settle the battle. It would have taken as many minutes in the 1850s for similar fleets to fight it out.
Eventually, the Paxence shell gun would be adopted by all the major navies, including, of course, the British. But in the meantime, it was not very popular with the French gun crews.
It was viewed, at least in the beginning, as unethical to shoot an exploding shell at a ship. Okay, it hadn't been done. The British didn't have exploding shells, so the French were a bit worried that if they were caught using these exploding shells, well, at least the crews were worried they'd be hung. The second reason was technical. The shells exploded in the guns occasionally. The fuses didn't go off correctly. And the third reason was the fact that it took more time to load a cannon using these shells. And you didn't get the number of broadsides off into the enemy that you would normally do with a well-trained crew using a normal round solid shot.
It wasn't only the crews that were resistant to change. There was also little enthusiasm from the officers. New technology was transforming society, but without a war, the Navy was in no hurry to adopt it, particularly steam engines for warships. A sailing man of war could go anywhere in the world. It could provision for months at sea between ports. The steamship could only go where there was coal. Huge engines took up quite a bit of storage space. Until the world could be ringed with fueling points, the high seas would remain the dominion of sailing ships.
The sailing ship of war had taken centuries to develop, and so a social structure had emerged over those years that enabled them to be sailed to the best of their ability. Into that carefully nurtured, long-standing structure suddenly came something completely new: the steam engine and the engineer. Was he an officer? Was he an artificer? And all his kind of arcane language, just like computer experts today, was very confusing for the traditional sailors.
Fire CCS, split plan, GTM 2 Alpha, 1 Alpha online, max speed available 22 knots.
Fire 2 Alpha.
Even in today's Navy, the engine rooms are alien, if not unknown territory to the rest of the crew. But the engineer has become a figure of respect. As the engine got more sophisticated, so did he. But fuel supply is still a matter of utmost priority.